Welcome to the study of Pastoral Theology Foundations 1. My name is Associate Professor Glenn Morrison. Topic 8. Henri Nouwen, the Wounded Healer. Henri Nouwen introduces the concept of the wounded healer firstly through story. He relates an interesting Talmudic story. It concerns Rabbi Joshua ben Levi, who was a very famous Jewish mystic of the 3rd century who often thought about the questions of life and death and of the world to come. Rabbi Joshua ben Levi has a dream or perhaps a vision, and in his dream or vision he sees the prophet Elijah. Now, being a mystic, he would want to ask quite an interesting question, a deep theological question. And so what does he ask? He says, "When will the Messiah come?" And then Elijah surprises him and he says, "Go and ask him yourself." And then Rabbi Joshua ben Levi responds to Elijah and says, "How will I recognize him?" Elijah says, "You will recognize him. He is sitting at the gates of the city with the poor who are covered with wounds. Now the poor, covered with wounds, unbind all their wounds all at once and then bind them up again. But the Messiah, blessed be he unbinds just one wound at a time and then binds it up again, because he thinks to himself, perhaps I will be needed. I need to be vigilant and ready to help somebody when they need me." This is a very beautiful story because it speaks of the wounded Messiah, and that we are, in terms of pastoral theology, called to be wounded healers like the Messiah. In Judaism, in Jewish theology, the question of when will the Messiah come speaks of a messianic age, of living in a messianic age where people work towards an end of economic violence and social oppression and political oppression as well. Yet, at the same time, Jewish people hope for a future world of what no eye has seen, nor ear heard, nor heart conceived, which is from Isaiah 64, and which St. Paul himself reproduces again in the first letter of the Corinthians, chapter 2. And so, for Jewish people, in many ways, when will the Messiah will come? It's today, if only you will listen to his voice. And St. Paul again repeats this in his second letter to the Corinthians, chapter 6. Today is a day of salvation. So, from this biblical theological foundation in terms of pastoral care and pastoral theology, what is the situation of the pastoral carer? How can wounds become a source of healing? We know in the first letter of Peter that encountering Christ, we know that through Jesus, through Christ, our wounds are healed. And we know that when Jesus rose from the dead, he rose with his wounds. This is very significant. Even St. Thomas himself asked to see, where are Jesus' wounds? And so, the situation of the pastoral carer, he is one with wounds, like the rest of humanity. And this can be a great source of healing, a great foundation, because it moves towards a sense of humility of approaching pastoral care. And the first beginning of humility is acknowledging that deep wound of loneliness. And the wound of the minister is often even more painful, because the vocation is one where people can be easily dismissed as unimportant, or at times it can be quite hard for a pastoral carer to enter into the world of the other, even if the carer has so many good qualities. Yet pastoral carers can stand virtually begging and waiting to be invited into the world of the other. So how do we begin to journey to let ourselves be invited? Henri Nouwen speaks of the value of hospitality and community. He speaks of the value of hospitality and concentration. So it's through prayer itself and acknowledging our deep openness to God that we can begin to journey over into the other and recognize our common humanity.